Hey, good morning, and welcome to a bit of an ad hoc edition of Talking to Artists. Talking to Artists is a podcast designed for artists, art collectors, art lovers, to really kind of understand a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes in terms of artist inspiration, but also a little bit about the business of art and how artists actually make a living and sort of get that magic out there in the world. So today we're doing a special session on Friday because we wanted to talk to Liza from Curator on the Go. And she is hopefully going to join us. There she is right here. I'm going to actually just invite her right off. So Liza's got a very interesting background where she curates shows, she mentors artists, as well as helps art collectors make their visit. Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good, so glad you could join me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it took me a while. I was sort of going about my day this morning, all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, I've got a talking to artist today on
Yeah.
Friday, which I don't normally have. I've sort of gotten into the habit of every Thursday, but it's great that you can join us.
Sorry, I'm gonna do Thursday.
Yeah, no problem. So I was just saying that you kind of are a bit of a trifecta in terms of you mentor artists about the business of art, which we're totally in simpatico on that one in terms of the need. I guess also work with collectors to build their
Yes,
unique art collections and also curate your own shows or curate shows on behalf of other organizations,
I do.
right?
I have lots of hats to wear.
Cool. Okay, well, maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of how you got started, um,
Yeah,
how you
for
kind of came to be
sure.
where you are.
So I have an undergrad degree in art history. So I wasn't thinking about like doing what I'm doing right now. I was trained like to write lots of essays, talk about art. Like I spent hours and hours going to museums, galleries, just getting inspired. And I got to the point where I was thinking whether like I'm gonna be an art teacher and just teach about art or what I want to do. So I
Mhm.
decided like working with artists. I started working in a gallery and I enjoyed doing curation side of working in the gallery. So like finding artists, finding a theme, collecting people, celebrating arts, seeing all of the conversations people have with the artists, with themselves, explaining how they should understand arts. And I realized, wow, like I want to curate shows. So I went and did my master's in curatorial studies at OCAD. And since then, I was working with artists full time because, like, I see how sometimes artists struggle and
Yeah.
sometimes they need help. They need guidance to realize, like, I can do it. They need, like, a little bit support too because the industry stuff, but artists can do it. They just need
Yes.
to understand, like, a little bit the steps and the secrets of how to do it smart, like not to work super hard, but like you could still do this, and that and be successful.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's, obviously that's one of the reasons I'm so involved in the Artist Network because that's the mandate is to really help artists with their business practice, assuming they've
Yes.
got the creative piece on kind of under their wing already, to provide a network of support. But I think you're right in the sense that it's not taught in art schools, which I think is a
Exactly.
travesty, as many people heard my rant many times before. But I think it's also, not only is it not taught, it's also artists are by their very nature set up to fail in the sense that still this pervading sense that you shouldn't be doing marketing, you shouldn't sell, you shouldn't produce your work to sell, which is such a luxury and so sad that artists don't think they can take the right to take the works that they produce and
For
sell them at a
sure.
good
Just
price,
want to
share
also
them with the
say
world, and benefit from it.
that it's not only for artists. Like I was doing my school for curatorial studies. We didn't talk about like how to price your services or how to go about it. Like it's the same
Yeah,
dilemma for a lot of things in art industry in general.
yeah. Well, hopefully with things like this, it'll change.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, are you an artist? Like, do you paint or create or?
I used to. When I was a little girl, I went to an art school, so I did 4 years, classically trained. So I used to paint a lot, but like right now, I wish I had more time.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's always the challenge too, right? It's so funny because I always talk to artists, and it's like, well, unfortunately, you have to do the marketing, you've got to do the business, and you've got to do all that stuff. And they're like, yeah, but I want to be in my studio. I'm like, yeah, who doesn't? Like, who doesn't want to
Exactly.
spend 8 hours a day in your studio? But it's not really. I mean, it's unfortunately that's kind of not the reality of the world. And if you're going to look at your art as a business, which really, if
Yes.
you're going to try and make a living from it, and not have to take time away from your studio to work as a bartender or something, then you have to kind of do that part of it that you don't love, right?
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit maybe about how you, like just for the artists, how you kind of would go about mentoring them, or what the process is, or kind of the issues, or maybe the common threads that you're seeing that a lot of artists who are coming to you are finding struggling with?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the main questions I always get is how to price your works. Because like there are some things on the internet you can find that like price per square inch or some other formulas, but artists are still struggling. Like I have another artist that I look at and they price it differently, or should I look at the artist or should I find my own formula? So I think this is always based on the individual basis of like
Mm-hmm.
your materials and like how many years you've been working in your practice, etc., etc. And like how many hours like you as an artist. You can also talk about like how you price your works because it's so different for every artist. But I think other things are how to approach a gallery, or should I work with the gallery? Is it like a requirement right now to be successful artist? Because like I truly believe that you can be successful with or without a gallery, and there are ways to be to sell your works without even like having a gallery representation.
Yeah. Well, I think it's always interesting. I get that question a lot as well. And then there's people that resent the galleries taking 50%.
Yes.
But I ran my own business for many years, a marketing business, where I had 10 employees, and you start to understand the overhead of having a
Exactly.
physical space and paying your internet cable. It's just like, well, that's what galleries have, right? Like you have to, I think, in order to have good relationships with galleries, you have to understand what they're doing to earn that 50%, and you
Yes.
have to kind of be okay with it, right? Otherwise, it creates this undercurrent of resentment, which I see sometimes with some artists.
Hmm. And it also depends on the different mediums. Like sometimes working with photographers, like it's costly for them to produce work versus
Hmm.
sometimes for artists it's like less expensive. But it also depends on an artist. I
Yeah.
would say just decide whether you want to work with the gallery or not. It's a personal choice.
And so, how do you help artists go through that philosophy or that kind of thought process?
About like working with a
Well,
gallery.
about making a decision as to whether or not you should or not. I mean, because I think you're right. There's kind of a certain thing like you go to art school and you start to sell, you do shows, you get to gallery. There's kind of seems to be this path that you're supposed to take. That's
Hmm.
not, of course, good for everybody. So, how do you help people decide what is good for them? Like, what kind of
Yeah, I
process
don't
do you
think
go
there is a
through?
pass because not everyone will go to school. Like we know a lot of successful self-taught artists, so going to art school is not a requirement. It's more a choice whether you want to be in that atmosphere of an art school.
Hmm.
I would say like I don't create a direction of like how your life should look like. I more create a direction like, for example, this year, what is your goals? Like what you've done last year, what's, for example, was your like income for last year, what is your projected income for this year, how we can divide this income into months, and how you can on a monthly basis, like what should you do to reach this goal, like whether you should do something like on the side, maybe you should teach art or something like you're also passionate about to feel less stressful that you just need to sell your works. Or
Yeah.
maybe you should also find a partner like a gallery where you should like bring some of your works and they will also promote and sell your works. Like we just talk a lot about like how to look an overall into
Yeah.
practice.
But I think you hit on a really important part, and that's kind of actually having a revenue target. And
Exactly.
there are a few artists I know that do that, and honestly, those are the ones that are successful, and they're the ones that are selling. And I
Yes.
think that for me personally, what it does is those days where you're just feeling kind of lazy, and you look at your revenue numbers, you're like, I'm not going to hit my numbers this month, so I'm going to follow up on those commissions I didn't feel like following up on, or I'm going to
Exactly.
make that call to the gallery that I don't really feel like doing. And I think for some people it can be overwhelming. For other people, like for me, actually, I find that it helps sometimes give a direction when on those days when I don't actually feel like I'm very creative. So it allows me to continue to work on the business.
Yeah, and I think with the business side, it's also important to nurture your collectors and your relationships, and not every communication or talk with the person will end into a sale right away. Like it may take
Yeah.
a year, it may take 2 years, who knows? But when you constantly like say, "Hey, this is me, this is my new collection. How are you doing?" Maybe you need like maybe you have an empty wall in your house and you need a piece of art. Like it's always like you need to find a creative ways of how to approach people and stay connected.
Yeah. And how do you, is there other things you recommend in terms of just thanking your collectors? Like, since you've got sort of a foot in both sides in terms of knowing what the artist's motivations are, and then obviously knowing how the collectors are they intimidated by artists, or how do you bridge those gaps, and how do artists help bridge those gaps?
I always say that when we think about like we also like we need to sell our works, but I also say that you need to educate your collectors. Like sometimes when you send newsletters and you like say, oh, this is my new collection, or this is like me in the studio, but what is the value you are sending to your collector in your newsletter? For example, like maybe you will talk about how to take care of an oil painting if you sell oil paintings, or how to mix and match different sizes on your wall. Maybe some collectors already bought like one or two pieces, and you say like you can do four or five on the wall to create like a salon style wall above your couch, and like you spark an interest, and maybe a person never thought about that before, or they feel
Right.
valued and taken care of when you think like beyond just selling and like presenting a new collection.
Hmm. And how do collectors work with you then? Like, what's the process with them?
I used to work as an independent curator, so I curated pop-up shows. So I rented venues and collected my artists. Recently, last year, I opened an online gallery. So this is the place where collectors now can see a roster of artists I work with. But I also like if some person has a specific request for an artist I don't work with, but I can still reach that person or reach the gallery who represent that artist, so I can find a way to get that piece to a collector.
And are you kind of helping collectors to build their sense of confidence in terms of finding their own style, or are these for
Exactly.
investment purposes, or?
Yes, like I focus mostly on the contemporary art. Sometimes like I go beyond that, but it's very important. Sometimes people just don't think how to mix and match, or what how to collect, or maybe they should have a theme or a mix and match of different mediums. Like sometimes you just have to talk, and it might be like a several talks before you realize like what you want to collect. And it also needs like the understanding, do you want to collect for investment? Like if you don't want to decorate just your place, but you also want maybe to resell your works in 5, 10 years, it's a different set of artists that you will
Right.
collect.
And so, and pre-COVID, of course, is it important for you to go to their homes and sort of see their space and see how they live to recommend
Yes,
things, or is it really just
yes.
that they come to the? Okay,
I
so
do that, or sometimes they just send me photos of their walls, and I just do in Photoshop, I just put some artworks into their walls and just to show them virtually how it will look like.
hmm. Oh, it sounds
And
like
that's
fun.
it.
And how do you find your clients? Like, how do collectors find you?
Sometimes it's word of mouth, sometimes I just do a lot of marketing. So that helps a lot.
Yeah. And then your third wheel of your stool, or whatever leg of your stool, is curation, right?
Yes. So
And
that's
so
my
that sounds like that's kind
passion.
of your baby. Yeah, because that's where you started, right?
It is my passion, because like this is where I unite the artists and the collectors together in this atmosphere of like celebrating art, talking about art, learning about art, and just enjoying, because like I realize we all miss this human connection and going to art shows and just being immersed in art. Like we can do
Hmm.
it virtually right now, but it's not the same. And
Yeah.
for me, like I just love this moment of being together, looking at art, celebrating art.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's nothing like actually being in front of a piece versus seeing it online, or, I
Exactly.
mean, we're doing the best we can because that's the reality of life, but it still will never replace being able to stand in front of a piece and just really be absorbed and soaked into it, just sort of pulled into the creative. Okay. And the other thing I was just kind of interested in is you do a podcast, which
I
sounds like it's,
do.
yeah, so kind of a
That
little bit
was
similar to this one.
exactly, like I know so many artists, and I know how hard it is to get interviews or features anywhere. And like pre-COVID time, when there were like less podcasts, like right now there are more,
Yeah.
or even reaching out to magazines. It's very costly to share your story on such platforms. And for me, it was just a way to give back to the art community and to interview artists and just share their stories with other artists, art collectors, or anyone just interested and wanted to get inspired by all the beautiful and amazing creatives that do their work. And we also talked about the business, how they do it, what worked, what didn't work, so everyone can learn.
And so you're on Spotify and
Everywhere.
iTunes, are you?
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, it's Curator on the Go podcast. So if you just type it in, you'll find it.
And how long have you been doing that for?
Almost 2 years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I took a break in like August, September last year because I was doing so many when COVID started. I was like passionate. Now I have time. And then I got to the point that like I also need to take a break.
Yeah, overwhelming.
Yes.
I know. It's funny because when I started I guess in April or May of last year. And partially it was just a response to, I was lonely. I wanted to talk to my friends, right? And I figured I might do it for, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. But I think this is my, a 32nd or 33rd episode now. So
good for you. Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah. But, and I'm kind of in the process of thinking about transferring this kind of medium into a podcast. So what made you choose a podcast over sort of doing something like Facebook Live or Instagram Live or YouTube or something like that?
I was thinking doing YouTube, but it's lots of work. I think like you can do it as a full-time job as a YouTuber. And like, I don't know how to do it properly. So I thought it's also costly to do a YouTube. Like I did one really like nice interview 2 years ago in an artist studio, but it cost me a lot of money, like to hire someone with professional cameras. It was like, it's a lot of work. So podcast is easy. Like I have time. I know how to edit. I also like do things myself. And
so can I pick your brain? Because I'm actually just doing that research right now, and it's feeling very overwhelming to try and figure out how to start down that path of what software do you use, or how do you figure out how to edit it, or
yeah, it's easy. I can send you the name after the podcast. I forgot the name. It's free, and you just like upload the MP3 file after you made the recording. And I like prefer to cut some parts like that it's noisy, or like you just chat, maybe say like in the middle of podcast, sometimes we like stop and chat about things that we don't want to include in the podcast.
Yeah.
But
or the classic technical challenges that come in the middle of the podcast.
Or rings or something like that. But it takes maybe an hour or so for me to edit because I want it still to be natural, and like I don't want to edit anything. I want it to feel as like the person is immersed in the conversation. They're like next to us, just listening.
Right. Yeah. I like that too. And as you know, because we actually have never chatted before. We've done a couple of texts through to DM and stuff through Instagram. But I kind of like the idea of going in cold and having these conversations where you just don't know what's going to come up.
Exactly.
I think makes it kind of authentic, but also, frankly, just more interesting when you're doing these time and time again, right?
For podcasts, I think sometimes it's easier for artists or whoever you're interviewing to know the questions in advance. But for a lot of interviews I had, artists just saw the questions, but they didn't write anything. So it still was natural, but they feel less stressed. Yeah.
Well, I think too, if you know them already, like some of the artists, especially at the beginning, I interviewed people that I knew. So they knew me, they were comfortable with me. And now I'm starting to get to people that I don't know quite so well. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes, and those people will kind of require a little bit more structure.
Sometimes like I usually have between 25 to 30 questions, and my podcast is usually like half an hour. But some artists talk more, some artists talk less, or more like in general people. Yeah. So I have extra questions sometimes.
And so did you have to... Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I probably should think about that. I did this originally pretty much off the cuff, but maybe I need to be a bit more structured about it. I'm just personally not structured, so that's probably the problem. And so did you have to kind of, obviously you had your name already, did you have to kind of create musical theme, or what else did you have to do for your podcast?
Like I already had my like brand, Curator on the Go, so I wasn't worried about like finding a name or something like that. I was just created a blurb, like before you start the interview, there is like a little intro. So I had to thought about like this little blurb or little pitch that I will have in every episode. So it's familiar for people to understand that this is like the podcast I used to listen to. And again, I use my motto that we don't need to look at artists as starting artists. We need to talk about business, and it's important. Just if you want to learn more, if you want to hear the stories of successful artists, just jump in.
Hmm.
Is
Yeah,
it true for
I
you?
just listened to the latest one you did with, I think it's Sienna, I think your name
Yes.
was. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back and listen to some more. So that'd be kind of cool.
Thank you.
So that'll be fun. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine who's, I guess, daughter-in-law or someone does that podcast, and she does it in her closet for like good sound quality. Do you have a special place you'd have to do it?
I heard a lot of people do that. I don't feel comfortable being in a closet.
It seems kind of weird.
Yes, and
Not
like
very authentic.
when I do podcasts, like I do it on my laptop and like I look at the person I talk to, like being in a closet, it doesn't make sense. Kind of.
Oh, okay. So
It's
you
like
still
when
get
you
that
record
face-to-face
yourself.
interaction. Oh yeah, okay.
Yes.
So you're still getting the face-to-face interaction, but you're just
Yes.
only
I feel
capturing
like it's more
the
natural.
yeah.
When you like look at each other, like I tell my artists, like you're not gonna be filmed for the interview, but it's just for us to feel comfortable to feel natural.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually, because otherwise it feels like a phone call to someone you don't know, and it gets kind of
Exactly.
stilted, and you can't read people's body language, and
Yeah.
yeah,
And
that sounds
you
cool.
feel more focused too, because sometimes when I started and like when I didn't know someone or someone didn't want to be on a camera, they say like, okay, let's do just voice recording. And sometimes I just get away in my mind and just start like texting or doing it. I'm like, stop, stop, stop. Like we need to be fully focused. I don't know
That's
what the
right.
other person is doing too on that.
Yeah, well, it's a classic when you're on Zoom calls without the camera on, right? And meanwhile, you're
Yes,
kind of like doing a couple things over here and writing your notes and eating
exactly.
your lunch, right? Yeah, not always a good thing. And the other thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because I'm just kind of curious, is, and I appreciate you don't want to share all your knowledge because you want people to actually work with you, so I understand that. But you talked a lot about kind of your area of social media and kind of how to build your brand in social media across multiple platforms.
Mhm.
Can you talk maybe just a little bit of that and just kind of give maybe a few tips for artists to kind of, be aware of without sort of giving away all the secrets?
Yeah, for sure. I think the number one rule everyone, no matter whether you're an artist or not, should do is be consistent with your Instagram. Like for myself, when I know like I decided to post every day and it's not the choice for everyone. Like that's okay. You can post 2 times a week or 4 times a week. But select specific days, select specific times, and post on those times and days. And when you do that, Instagram will reward you and it will show your post to your audience. It will show like it will know that you will be posting in the next like 10 minutes and it will show your post to more people. So when I do that, I get more engagement. I have more likes,
So,
I got more comments.
so consistent dates as well as time. I didn't realize time was kind of an
Yes, and
important factor
times
in
too.
that.
And
And
then when I
is there
don't
a better,
post,
sorry,
no worries. And when I don't post, the next day I do the post in a regular time and day, I get less.
right.
So I got punished.
Bad girl.
I know.
And oh, what was I going to say? Huh, can't remember. It's gone.
Yeah, no worries. And like
And so it,
another thing I wanted to mention quickly is to decide on your content. I truly believe that there are 3 areas that everyone should focus on. Entertainment, for artists, it can be like for you painting in a studio or you showing your work. Education, in relation what you do, like maybe what mediums you use, what paints, how to talk about art, like whatever. And the third one, 10% sales. Don't be too pushy, but still you need
right.
to show what you sell, what you do.
And how personal should you be? I think this is a question that comes up a lot in terms of how much of your personal life do you share that's beyond your business life as an artist?
I share not a lot of personal life. Like I don't talk about my relationship because it's not relevant to my industry or what I do. But I share about things that happen to me in the art world. If I have unpleasant conversation or experience, I will always share because people learn from each other. And I truly believe if something is of value to other people and it's personal and again relates to what you do or what people also doing, like you should share it. Because
Right.
sometimes I feel like I don't want to be on Instagram and I say like I feel that I'm burned out, I don't want to be on Instagram, and I will share that. And I get a lot
Hmm.
of comments of people saying like I feel the same way. And this is how
Yeah.
you build a connection.
Okay. And is there a preferred, like, is it better to do Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, or does it depend on your audience, or how do you make that decision?
I do Facebook and Instagram. Like with Instagram, you just it automatically posts on Facebook. So like you don't need to do much. Like I don't use Twitter. For me, like it's important to use the platforms I feel comfortable with, and limit myself to a small number of platforms, but do it better there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I have other avenues like platform, podcast, and other things like.
Right. And so I've sort of heard sometimes some people say yes, some people say no in terms of, because I find Instagram is certainly the one that I'm the most comfortable with, and it seems so designed for visual artists because it's so
Yes.
visual. I kind of struggle personally around navigating my way around Facebook, even though I know that's kind of where my audience is. And so I just kind of basically post it automatically to Facebook. But does that mean I'm not getting the algorithms from Facebook that I could be getting, or is that just sort of standard procedure?
I don't know, like with Facebook, I've heard a lot of stories and I see that myself that if your targeted audience is 50 and up, Facebook is a good place to be active. If your targeted audience is younger, so Instagram is the way to find and connect with them. So this is like one thing to think about. And Facebook, it's so confusing sometimes with all of the algorithms. So I would say like, don't worry too much.
Okay, because I was getting kind of stressed. I spent a lot of time on Facebook yesterday, and I'm like, I just am so stressed. I don't know.
And for me, it also works like with Facebook, not to worry too much about like what you post, but maybe like connecting to different groups on Instagram. There are so many groups that are beyond artist groups that can also relate, like something about entrepreneurship or business or something like sports, nature. Just connect there, introduce yourself. I'm an artist. You never know. Some people might want to buy art. They don't know any artist personally, and you join the group, and this is how you start a conversation.
Yeah, it starts to get a little overwhelming, doesn't it? Like you could honestly spend easily 4 hours a day doing all this stuff, and it's kind of not necessarily what you want to do. But yeah, I'm sort of torn because I know that's really important, but I know you have to also make decisions on where you spend your time, right? Yeah. And I haven't quite figured out the groups in terms of, I don't know. I think you have to be authentic and you have to put the time into those groups. And do I have the time? I tend to belong to a lot of groups and listen to what they say. But anyway, that's just me. I haven't quite figured that out yet.
My good experience when I started Coffee Art Gallery last year, I joined a group of female entrepreneurs. And they were also like starting out during the pandemic. And every day we had one task to do it. And it was in relation to like help each other on Instagram. So one day we were just doing like multiple likes on each other posts or leaving a comment or sharing it in a story and follow each other. So, and that helped everyone to grow the page and get a lot of engagement.
Right. And so I guess that's really, there's no fast way then of growing your followers, right? It takes time and you have to build it over time.
There is an easy way to buy followers. I think that, and you can easily tell if you go to someone's pages and go through people who follow you, like you can easily tell. But I personally don't understand that because those people are not going to buy your work. Like, okay, you have a big number, but why do you need it if it's not going to convert?
Well, exactly. And I think, again, also you kind of have to think about, I have friends who are in the 10, 20, 40,000 followers, and each post gets like 100 comments. I mean, that alone starts to also become its own task that you got to focus on every day, right? So you need to acknowledge everybody and respond back. So
exactly.
But so I'll start slow and steady, I guess.
Yes.
That's the best way to go. Okay. Is there anything else that you can kind of feel you want to share, or how people would get a hold of you, or maybe talk about how artists or art collectors would work with you?
Yeah, for sure. I'm easily accessible. Instagram is my main place to connect. So if you just direct message me, or there is a button to email me. So it's liza.curatoronthego@gmail.com for my email, or curatoronthego.com for my website. And for artists, I do
your Facebook and Instagram, so are also both Curator on the Go. Right? Yeah.
And I have all of the information necessary for everyone to read and to find and learn about me on my website, about my services.
Well, it sounds good. Sounds interesting. Yeah.
Yes,
well,
thank you very much.
Hope you're doing well, because I really think that what you're doing is a really great service, and I do believe that artists need that, and sometimes it's hard for them to wrap their heads around having to pay for services like that. But I think that's really where a lot of the value comes, where you have somebody from outside your own group that kind of can give you critical, helpful feedback.
Yes, thank you very much. And I want to say that like you don't need to spend millions of dollars to get help. Some artists just need like a call a month, and it's not that expensive. And just feel that like if you're not going to invest in yourself, who will?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's kind of like that whole thing about having an accountability buddy, like you were saying before, like you're having
Yes.
to commit. So for me, I meet with my sister, who's also an artist, and
Hmm.
every Monday at 5 o'clock, and we have this call, and we have we chat, of course, socially for a little bit, but then we talk about revenue and marketing and client
Yes,
relationships and retention, and it just forces you to think about it. But the other
exactly.
thing is, I know if I haven't done what I'm supposed to do on Sunday, I'm like, shit, I better get my shit together and actually do it, right? I have to count it to Helen on Monday. So you can be someone's accountability buddy.
Exactly. Like I started the membership platform for artists where like I have a small group of artists and we track the progress of each other. So it's like
Oh,
a
that's great.
mastermind in a way.
Yeah.
So that also
Oh, that's
goes well.
fabulous.
Yes, thank you.
Well, it's been really great talking to you, and really enjoyed sort of chatting a little bit about this, some things we haven't really talked about before, which was the social media and the podcast and stuff. But certainly your services too. I'm sure that there are artists that will find them very helpful.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure to chat with you and excited to hear your podcast soon.
Yeah. Well, I'm working. I'll let you know.
Yes,
I
thank
might
you.
be calling you for advice.
Absolutely. Will be my
Okay.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Bye bye. Okay, well, that was lovely. Thank you so much. And I'm committing in public here because this is, I find, the best way to keep me accountable. Is I am actually going to I'm going to continue to do the talking for artists. But as you've noticed over the last couple months, I haven't been actually answering questions from the audience except for yesterday, which was a very designed to be more in person. And the reason for that is because I do want to take the audio and actually convert it into a podcast. The feedback I've been getting is that a lot of artists and some collectors, but mostly artists, are listening to it as they're painting or they're in their studio. And so um, anyway, I think that could be pretty exciting and kind of fun to do. So if any of you out there are podcast experts, you have any advice on how to actually transfer this stuff from Instagram to some sort of podcast format, I would love to hear it. Other than that, have a fabulous weekend, and we will talk to you next Thursday. We're back to our Thursday schedules, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Going to be talking to Sheila Davis, who does beautiful colored landscapes, so I'm really looking forward to her. And we have our schedule booked all the way until, I think, around the middle of March. So that's exciting. But as always, and some of those artists actually are people that I've reached out to because you guys have said, hey, I think you should interview this artist. And so that's what we've done. So if there's other people that you think you'd like to hear from, other artists that you think are doing something interesting or unique, or savvy business people that you think that we can all learn from, please DM me and I would be thrilled to reach out to them. So have a fabulous day, and we'll talk to you next Thursday.